Thanks, you too.
Chapter 10. The family begins to starve. During the next 2 weeks, the weather turned very cold. First came the snow. It began very suddenly one morning, just as Charlie Bucket was getting dressed for school. Standing by the window, he saw the huge flakes drifting down from the icy sky that was the color of steel. By evening, it lay 4 feet deep around the tiny house, and Mr. Bucket had to dig a path from the front door to the road. After the snow, there came a freezing gale that blew for days and days without stopping. And oh, how bitter cold it was. Everything that Charlie touched seemed to be made of ice, and each time he stepped outside the door, the wind was like a knife on his cheek. Inside the house, the little jets of freezing air came rushing through the sides of the windows and under the doors, and there was no place to go to escape them. The four old ones, they lay silent and huddled in their bed, trying to keep the cold out of their bones. The excitement over the golden tickets had long since been forgotten. Nobody in the family gave it a thought now to anything except the two vital problems of trying to keep warm and trying to get enough to eat. There is something about very cold weather that gives one an enormous appetite. Most of us find ourselves beginning to crave rich, steaming stews and hot apple pies and all kinds of delicious warming dishes. And because we are all a great deal luckier than we realize, we usually get what we want, or near enough. But Charlie Bucket, he never got what he wanted because the family couldn't afford it. And as the cold weather went on and on, he became ravenous and desperately hungry. Both bars of candy, the birthday one and the one that Grandpa Joe had bought, had long been nibbled away, and all he got now were those thin, cabbagey meals 3 times a day. Then all at once, the meals became even thinner. The reason for this was that the toothpaste factory, the place where Mr. Bucket worked, suddenly went bust and had to close down its doors. Quickly, Mr. Bucket tried to get another job, but he had no luck. In the end, the only way in which he managed to earn a few pennies was by shoveling snow in the streets. But it wasn't enough to buy even a quarter of the food that 7 people needed. The situation became desperate. Breakfast was a single slice of bread for each person now, and lunch was maybe half a boiled potato. Slowly but surely, everybody in the house, they began to starve. And every day little Charlie Bucket, trudging through the snow on his way to school, would have to pass Mr. Willy Wonka's giant chocolate factory. And every day as he came near it, he would lift his small pointed nose high up into the air and sniff the wonderful, sweet smells of melting chocolate. Sometimes he would stand motionless outside the gates for several minutes on end, taking deep, swallowing breaths as though he were trying to eat the smell itself. "Oh, that child," said Grandpa Joe, poking his head up from under the blanket one icy morning. "Oh, that child has got to have more food. It doesn't matter about us. We're too old to bother with. But a growing boy, he can't go on like this. He's beginning to look like a skeleton." "What can one do?" muttered Grandma Josephine miserably. "He refuses to take any of ours." I hear his mother tried to slip her own piece of bread onto his plate at breakfast this morning, but he wouldn't touch it. He made her take it back." "Oh, he's a fine little fellow," said Grandpa George. "He deserves better than this." The cruel weather, it went on, and every day Charlie Bucket grew thinner and thinner. His face became frighteningly white and pinched, and the skin was drawn so tightly over the cheeks that you could see the shapes of the bones underneath. It seemed doubtful whether he could go on much longer like this without becoming dangerously ill. And now, very calmly, with that curious wisdom that seems to come so often to small children in times of hardship, he began to make little changes here and there in some of the things that he did, so as to save his strength. In the morning, he left the house 10 minutes earlier so he could walk slowly to school without ever having to run. He sat quietly in the classroom during recess, resting himself while the others rushed outdoor and would throw snowballs and wrestle in the snow. Everything he did now, he did slowly and carefully to prevent exhaustion. Then one afternoon, walking back home with the icy wind in his face, and incidentally feeling hungrier than he had ever felt before, his eye was caught. Suddenly, it saw a piece of paper that was lying in the gutter, in the snow. The paper was a greenish color, and there was something vaguely familiar about it. Charlie stepped off the curb. He bent down to examine it. Part of it was buried under the snow, but he saw at once what it was. It was a dollar bill. He quickly looked around him. Had somebody just dropped it? No, that was impossible because of the way that part of it was buried in the snow. Several people went hurrying past him on the sidewalk, their chins sunk down deep into their collars of their coats, their feet crunching in the snow. None of them were searching for any money. None of them were taking the slightest notice of a small boy crouching in the gutter. Then was it his, this dollar? Could he have it? So carefully, Charlie pulled it out from under the snow. It was damp and dirty, but otherwise perfect. A whole dollar. Oh, he held it tightly between his shivering fingers, gazing down at it. It meant one thing to him at that moment, only one thing. It meant food. Automatically, Charlie turned and began moving toward the nearest shop. It was only 10 paces away. It was a newspaper and stationery store, the kind that sells almost everything, including candy. And what would he do? He whispered quickly to himself. He would buy one luscious bar of candy and eat it all up, every bit of it, right then and right there. And the rest of the money he would take straight back home and give to his mother. Next, chapter 11, the miracle. Charlie entered the store and he laid down the damp dollar bill on the counter. "One Wonka's Wimple Scrumptious Fudge Mallow Delight," he said, remembering how much he had loved the one he had on his birthday. The man behind the counter looked fat and well fed. He had big lips and fat cheeks and a very fat neck. The fat around his neck bulged out all around the top of the collar like a rubber ring. He turned and he reached behind him for the candy bar. Then he turned back again and handed it to Charlie. Charlie grabbed it and quickly tore off the wrapper and took an enormous bite. Then he took another and another. And oh, the joy of being able to cram large pieces of something sweet and solid into his mouth. The sheer, blissful joy of being able to fill one's mouth with rich, solid food. You really look like you wanted that one, Sonny, the shopkeeper said pleasantly. Charlie nodded, his mouth bulging with chocolate. The shopkeeper put Charlie's change on the counter. All right, take it easy, he said. It'll give you a gut ache if you swallow it like that without chewing. But Charlie went on wolfing down the candy. He couldn't stop. And in less than half a minute, the whole thing had disappeared down his throat. He was quite out of breath, but he felt marvelously, extraordinarily happy. He reached out a hand to take the change, but then he paused. His eyes were just above the level of the counter. They were staring at the little silver coins that were laying there. The coins were all dimes. There were 9 dimes altogether. Surely it wouldn't matter if he spent just one more. I think, he said quietly, I think I'll have just one more of those candy bars. The same kind as I had before, please. Why not? The fat shopkeeper said, reaching behind him again and taking another Whipple scrumptious fudge mallow delight right off the shelf. He laid it on the counter. Charlie picked it up and he tore off the wrapper, and suddenly from underneath the wrapper there came this brilliant flash of gold. Charlie's heart stood still. It's a golden ticket, screamed the shopkeeper, leaping about with one foot in the air. You have got a golden ticket. You have found the last golden ticket. Oh, hey, what do you know? Come and look at this, everybody, he said. The kids found Wonka's last golden ticket. There it is, right there in his hands, said the shopkeeper. It seemed as though the shopkeeper might be going to have a fit. Oh, and it's in my store, too, he yelled. He found it right here in my little shop. Somebody call the newspaper, quick, and let them know. Now watch out now, Sonny, watch out. Don't tear it as you unwrap it. This thing is precious, the shopkeeper said. In a few seconds, there was a crowd of them, 20 people clustering around Charlie, and many more were pushing their way in from the street. Everybody wanted to look at the golden ticket and at the lucky finder. Where is it? Where is it? One shouted. Hold it up so all of us can see it. Well, here it is, somebody else shouted. Well, he's holding it in his hands. See the gold shining? How did he manage to find it? I would love to know, a large boy shouted angrily. 20 bars a day I've been buying for weeks and weeks, he said. Think of all the free stuff he'll be getting now, said another boy enviously. A lifetime supply. Well, he'll need it, the skinny little shrimp, said a girl laughing. Charlie didn't move. He hadn't even unwrapped the golden ticket yet from around the candy bar. He was standing very still, holding it tightly with both hands, while the crowd pushed and shouted all around him. He felt quite dizzy. There was a peculiar floating sensation coming over him, as though he were floating up in the air like a balloon. His feet didn't seem to be touching the ground at all. He couldn't hear his heart. He could hear it, and it was thumping away loudly, very loudly, somewhere in his throat. And at that point, he became aware of a hand that was resting lightly on his shoulder. And when he looked up, he saw a tall man standing over him. "Listen," the man whispered to him. "I will buy it from you. I will give you $50. How about it, huh? And I will give you a nice new bicycle as well. Okay?" Another woman shouted, "Are you crazy?" She was standing equally close. "Why, I would give him $500 for that ticket." "You want to sell that ticket for $500, young man?" That is quite enough," the fat shopkeeper shouted to them, pushing his way through the crowd and taking Charlie firmly by the arm. "Leave that kid alone, will you? Now make your way. Make a way here. Let him out," the shopkeeper said. And to Charlie, as he led him to the door, he whispered to him, "Don't you let anybody have it. You take it straight home, quickly, before you lose it. Run all the way, and don't stop till you get there. Do you understand?" Charlie just nodded. The shopkeeper said, "You know something?" He paused for a moment, smiling at Charlie. "I have a feeling that you needed a break just like this. I am awfully glad you got it too. Good luck to you, Sonny," he said. "Thank you," said Charlie, and off he went, running through the snow as fast as his legs would go. And as he flew past Willy Wonka's factory, he turned and he waved at it, and he sang out loud, I'll be seeing you soon." And then 5 minutes later, he arrived back at his own home.